I didn't have a lot as a kid, and that's okay. My mom worked really hard for the things that we did have, and I appreciate that. In fact, I know she's going to watch this video, so I'm going to say, thanks, Mom. We just simply didn't have the extra money to go buy expensive game consoles, so I did what every other kid did. I got myself a side job, I took my money and went to Blockbuster, and I would rent a console. I'd grab a Genesis, and I'd grab a handful of games, and I would disappear in front of the TV for the weekend. 2021 gave us the Sega Genesis Mini, and it had 40 games in it, including Sonic the Hedgehog, Earthworm Jim, Echo the Dolphin, and Shining Force. Well, the hot ticket item for holiday 2022 is, well, it's a Sega Genesis Mini 2. It may be a little bit smaller, but now it contains 60 games, including some Sega CD titles like, well, Sewer Shark and Night Trap. I also know that Herzog Zwei is in there, and that's going to relive a big part of my childhood. So, I'm Ron Burke, editor-in-chief for GamingTrend.com, and I cannot wait to unbox this thing and see what's inside. Normally I'd have the previous product out of frame, but in this case I think it's going to require some comparison. So opening it up, we have the same USB-A to, looks like, yep, USB micro. I wish they'd go USB-C, but what can you do? One HDMI cable. I know that this is a 720p output, just like the Sega Genesis Mini 1. So HDMI is pretty much the go-to. And the first point of comparison. Obviously we have the original 3-button Genesis full size here, and now we have the Genesis 6-button. Now this is not the same size as the original release, but at least for my hands, that looks like that'll be comfortable enough. Buttons are a little bit squishy though, at least comparison to the giant monstrosities on this one. I do like this. Included in the box is the power adapter. Instead of having it integrated, it's simply a USB. So if I need to swap this out at some point, I can. And then the star of the show, the Genesis Mini 2. Now this looks like it's actually modeled after the Japanese Sega Genesis. The American Genesis had a push button, and this has a switch. You know, if you're into that kind of history, well, here it is. It does have the same 2-lever dust cover as this one, which is pure fidget spinnery goodness. There's obviously no dust to block, but it doesn't stop me from imagining putting cartridges in there. Around the back, we have the HDMI port that I mentioned before, 720p. There's the micro USB connector. And then on the front, we have 2 USB Type A ports. You may have noticed I only pulled 1 controller out of the box. The Genesis Mini 1 came with 2 controllers, but it was the 3-button variety. Here we have a 6-button controller, which honestly for games like Golden Axe, you need 6 buttons. So I'm gonna have to look into a third-party controller or see if I can order one from Sega. After we look at some gameplay, while you're looking at that montage, I'll be ordering one of those, so I'll let you know at the end of this video. With the system unpacked, it's time to load up some games and we'll talk through some of the best ones on the system. I'm not going to cover every single game on the list, but we are going to tackle a handful of these in alphabetical order, with a short bullet on each. Before we get to those, however, I want to point out something pretty cool. Sega's included the original manuals to all of these titles on the official Japanese website for the Sega Genesis Mini 2. You can find that in our written review at GamingTrend.com. And to answer the question, yes, you can use a third-party controller. In fact, I'm using one that looks like a Sega Saturn controller from Retrobit. Alien Soldier. This one's new to the United States from 80s mainstay Treasure. In a time where characters lack detail and were often super tiny, Alien Soldier goes the other way. Big and bizarre bosses, a big main character, big weapons, just big. It's also a lot of fun. Just know that it's extraordinarily tough. You're gonna die a lot, so make use of that save state. Clay Fighter. There's so many fighting games from the 80s out there, so it's nice when developers try something new, even if it's less than successful. Here we have developer Visual Concepts jumping in on the Killer Instinct / Mortal Kombat personality style fighting games, but using a completely unique claymation animation style. Desert Strike. This is the game that kicked off the series in its pure nostalgic goodness. It'll take a second to get used to the tank controls in the air, but once you do, you'll be roaring through the skies, whipping missiles into enemy strongholds in no time. Crusader Ascenti. I'd never heard of this one until I got the Sega Genesis Mini 2, but I'm glad I've got it in my library now. It's very much inspired by the likes of The Legend of Zelda, and it's really one of the top shelf titles that make this mini console worth owning. Don't sleep on this one. Devian Pi. Here we are with another title that's exclusive to Japan, but this time with a twist. This game was actually cancelled before it was released, so this is the only place you're likely going to see it. It very much reminds me of a bar-top game you might find in a pool hall. It's kind of like Pong, and it's in Japanese, so it's more nostalgia than it is a mini console seller. Earthworm Jim 2. On the first Genesis Mini we got Earthworm Jim, and for this mini console we have Earthworm Jim 2. Far sillier than its predecessor, this game's an absolute blast. Well, other than having to drag that damn balloon in Flying King. Echo the Dolphin and Echo the Dolphin Tides of Time. We got Echo the Dolphin on the first Genesis Mini, but now we've got the definitive edition from the Sega CD. With it comes an excellent soundtrack for both games. While the final level for the first title may still give us Giger-esque nightmares, it's awesome to get the definitive edition here. Fantasy Zone. This is a fantastic shmup from NEC Avenue.
Controlling Opa Opa, yes, that's the name of the ship, you'll blast your way through ultra bright levels, taking out enemies and bosses for coins that you can use to buy upgrades. This sort of progression in shmups was pretty rare, and to see it with bright and colorful art instead of all grimdark is nice for a change. Fatal Fury 2. Here's where having a 6-button controller is a must. I've played more than my fair share of Fatal Fury 2 both on consoles and arcades, and here we have an excellent port of the arcade version. Big thumbs up. Final Fight CD. From one fighter to another, this is an excellent port of the Sega CD version of the game. 2-player brawling, tight controls, and the excellent CD soundtrack make this side-scrolling beat-em-up the one you want to tackle with your friends. Golden Axe 2. Another great multiplayer game. Grab a second controller and smash up treasure goblins and weird egg-shaped whiptail creatures. This time around we'll swap potions for magic books, but the beats are mostly the same as the previous game. If you like Golden Axe, you're gonna dig the sequel. Herzog Zwei. Yep, this is what I came for. This game is one of the first RTS titles I ever played, and it started my love of strategy that endures to this day. This game is the granddaddy to games like Dune 2 and Warcraft, setting the stage for those excellent titles just a few years later. Rather than controlling a mouse cursor, you'll fly a fighter around the map to construct your buildings in your army. Even now, I'm floored at how robust and balanced this game truly is. Even 30 years later, this game brings back some fantastic childhood memories. This right here, this is the system seller for me. It's just that good. Lightning Force, Quest for the Dark Star. This title wins the dumbest North American rename, being called Thunder Force 4 in Japan. Also, Lightning Force is not a misspelling or a mispronunciation. Thankfully, this shmup is an absolute blast to play. Yes, it still has some slowdown just like we saw in the original Genesis, but it's nothing too egregious given just how much chaos is going on. Seriously, lightning. Night Striker. This is another new title for the United States, and frankly, I'm not sure why the M2 team decided to include it. It's frankly hard on the eyes, far too pixelated for its own good, and downright hard to play as a result.
Stand by ready. Good luck.
And Sarah's coming in with 6 more tonight. 6? Yeah.
Night Trap. Yep, this is the reason why we have the ESRB. It's the reason why Congress got involved in the video game industry, looking extraordinarily out of touch and downright stupid as a result. All that aside, this is the Sega CD version of the game from original developer Digital Pictures, starring Dana Plato from Different Strokes. Here's the big story beats for those who haven't played the original version or the recent re-release on PS4. You play as a member of SCAT, that would be Special Control Attack Team, who are in charge of an investigation of strange otherworldly activities against a local group of teenagers. You'll do this by hacking into the extensive CCTV system at their obscenely large home. Spying on the slumber party in progress, I swear I'm not making this up, you'll find that a group of vampire creatures called augurs are intending to capture the B-movie teens. You'll then use a series of traps hidden all over the house to stop them in their tracks. It's like if Home Alone was made by a schlocky horror director, but with all the special effects and writing quality of Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, with all that that statement implies. It'll take you about 30 minutes to complete if you manage to jump between the cameras fast enough to stop the augurs and other potential calamities, though you'll probably still want to let some of these idiots get captured just to shut them up. Frankly, it's tame by today's standards. Play it for yourself and then remember just how absolutely dumb we all looked when this ended up in front of Congress.
And this is my wife, Sheila.
Hello. Come on, everyone. Let's go in the house. Okay.
Phantasy Star 2. This is another game that got multiple rentals for me. Phantasy Star 2 is another one of those games that just set up everything that came afterwards. Released in the United States just 2 months before Final Fantasy, this game had excellent animations for its combat, big sprites, gorgeous graphics, and a fantastic storyline with a sci-fi twist. It also features some bafflingly painful design choices like the combat sprites that slowly fade in and out, exacerbated by the frequent random combat and drab dungeon designs. Thankfully, this game benefits from the second look by M2, giving us a way to fast forward past those fade outs and other slow bits of combat. Ranger X. Here's another game I never got to play. Ranger X is a fantastic mech-based game from developer Gao Entertainment. Running and gunning, this side-scroller tries out a lot of awesome concepts that were way ahead of its time. Modular weapon designs, a secondary vehicle that you can fly and ride on, and even cutscenes are in here. It's another big hit for the Mini too. Rystar. Remember when Sega thought this little star guy was going to be their potential mascot? Yeah, we all said collectively no to that idea. We already had a mascot and his name is Sonic. Still, this is a fun little platform and completely earns its spot on the Mini too. Try it out, I think you'll find a bright and colorful, fun little game. Rolling Thunder 2. I played this to death in the arcade, and now I can play it at home. The team took inspiration from the long-legged look of Japanese manga and pulled it right into this game as sprites. This is another system seller, complete with its stellar and highly memorable soundtrack.
Critters at play, not afraid.
Sewer Shark. This game's exclamation of "I'm Ratigator bait" is forever seared into my brain. This title is another FMV Sega CD game that can be beaten somewhere between 40 minutes to an hour if you do really well. But the gameplay is essentially a first-person rail shooter where you play as a, quote, sewer jockey, charged with clearing mutant sewer monsters out of the, you guessed it, sewers. Try it for the nostalgia and enjoy the fact that loading times are far shorter than they were on Sega CD.
Get this crate on track, pickle neck.
Shadow Dancer, Secret of the Shinobi. Honestly, I could have almost bought a Sega Genesis and Sega CD for the amount of money I spent renting this game and the console to play it on. I loved playing the first one with its oversized bosses on the first Genesis Mini, but this sequel is so improved over that title that it's hard to believe that it's part of the same series. This one has a dog, ergo, it's perfect. Shining Force CD, Shining Force 2, and Shining in the Darkness. I've played through these games multiple times, though Darkness is a bit of a departure being a 3D dungeon crawler, and it's helped me hone my love of tactical turn-based titles. Containing concepts that made their way into other tactical titles years later, including a fully baked job system, Shining Force CD is a serious upgrade to the game we got on the first Genesis Mini. It's another system seller, even if you aren't into the Baldur's Gate style of the sequel. Sonic CD. This one should have been a slam dunk, but it isn't. You can play the US version with a remastered soundtrack, and that's pretty fantastic, but arguably it's not the correct soundtrack. Jump over to the EU version and you get the correct soundtrack, but somehow there's a whole bunch of stuttering. Flipping to the Japanese language track has the correct soundtrack, and none of the judder, but you're probably going to struggle with the language barrier. It's nice to have options, but this is one I'd have been okay with a fourth option: English, correct soundtrack, and best performance.
Welcome to the fantasy zone. Get ready.
Space Harrier 1 and 2. This game's a bit of a controversy since Sega started porting it from the excellent arcade title back on the original Genesis. That Genesis title back in the 90s was a stuttering mess. M2 remastered the game and managed to iron out the performance issues, but now there's a bunch of flickering. It's nowhere near as bad as the also included original Space Harrier game, but this one just doesn't feel fully baked.
Get ready. Get ready.
Splatterhouse 2. Most folks have played the first game but never managed to check out the sequel. Well, now's your chance. Come for the possessed hockey mask motif, stay for the smashing, squishy zombie types so hard that they splatter against the wall in the background with a satisfyingly wet sound. Super Locomotive. This is another exclusive for the Sega Genesis Mini 2, and another title that makes me wonder why it's here. I didn't expect every game to be a smash hit, but frankly, I'm just not sure why this game exists, much less why it's on this console. This is the hardest of hard passes. Super Street Fighter 2: The New Challengers. Do you need convincing to play this? This version introduces new fighters Cammy, DJ, T-Hawk, and Fei Long, alongside new modes like group battle, tournaments, and time challenges. I never really got the hang of kicking those barrels in the minigame, but now I can at least try without going bankrupt one quarter at a time.
You win. Round 2, fight. You win.
Toe Jam and Earl, Panic on Funkatron. Like Earthworm Jim, this sequel is even better than the first. Toe Jam and Earl managed to rebuild their ship in the first game, and in the sequel they've reached the home planet of Funkatron. The humans unfortunately stowed away and invaded Funkatron, stealing all the funk and scaring off Lamont the Funkopotamus. The 90s were weird, and this is peak weirdness, but the soundtrack is a blast and it's a fun game to play, so give it a try. Virtual Racing. While not a great game, it's an impressive one in terms of technology. Not unlike Star Fox and its use of Super FX chips, this game managed to pull off some fairly technically impressive feats for its time. It really doesn't age well in terms of gameplay, but it's a marvel in terms of early transition to 3D graphics. Warsong. Another great strategy RPG, Warsong reminds me of other games in this era like North vs. South or more modern titles like Advance Wars, although not nearly as pretty. Also known as Langrisser, along with 4 sequels in Japan, this fantasy tactical title had concepts like being able to bolster your army with pre-battle purchases, positioning your troops ahead of the fight, and a full class system for your commanders. Like Herzog Zwei, this game has a very special spot in my heart that grew into my tactical title obsession today.
Get ready.
I hope you enjoyed this rundown of the Sega Genesis Mini 2. The Sega Genesis Mini was an incredible mini console, and the Genesis Mini 2 manages to beat it in every single way. More titles and better quality, and with a few hidden surprises. This is a must-have for any kid like me who never managed to get one when they were a kid. Or just somebody who wants to relive the classics. Buy it quick though, these are going to disappear real fast. I'm Ron Burke, Editor-in-Chief for GamingTrend.com. Stay safe out there, happy holidays, and we'll see you again very soon.